Every single winter, millions of drivers willfully subject their personal vehicles to a slow, methodical, and entirely chemical execution. The highway infrastructure is deliberately coated in aggressive rock salt and highly conductive de-icing chemicals that attach instantly to exposed steel, initiating a relentless electrochemical reaction. To allegedly prevent this destruction, dealerships and auto body shops systematically convince you to purchase thick, rubberized undercoating packages costing upwards of $800. They look you in the eye and tell you this black rubber shell is the ultimate protection. They are lying with absolute precision. These highly expensive commercial coatings are mechanically engineered to fail. They crack microscopically as your heavy steel chassis flexes over rough pavement. Toxic liquid salt water seeps deep behind the rubber via capillary action, becoming trapped in a dark, oxygen-deprived space where it aggressively eats through your primary frame rails, entirely hidden from view. This is manufactured complexity at its finest, a system designed to ensure your vehicle structurally fails within 10 to 15 years, forcing you to finance a new automobile. Winter road salt decay is the foundational pillar of a $30 billion revenue generator. But there is a permanent molecular barrier that stops iron oxide dead in its tracks. It costs exactly $2 to make, requires no specialized machinery, and was engineered by military scientists during the largest global conflict in human history. If you have a rusting vehicle sitting in your driveway right now, drop the word rust in the comments. We want to know exactly how many people are dealing with this deliberately ignored problem. Corporate entities constantly dictate that modern problems require highly expensive solutions. They rely on billions in marketing to convince the public that protecting a basic steel frame requires toxic, proprietary aerosol sprays repurchased every single autumn. This business model is built entirely on recurring revenue. They absolutely need your chassis to remain perpetually vulnerable to sell you a temporary cure on a perpetual subscription basis. But true preservation comes from understanding the fundamental electrochemical reality of metal and moisture. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you dismantles their $30 billion racket piece by piece. The absolute secret to rust eradication was perfected out of sheer necessity decades ago in a theater of operations far more hostile than any snowy highway. To properly understand the deliberate suppression of this method, we must examine the United States Navy archives from 1944, specifically a declassified briefing titled Corrosion Control in Amphibious Vehicles. During massive naval campaigns in the Pacific, thousands of heavy steel landing craft were continuously plunged into highly corrosive saltwater and driven onto abrasive beaches. Conventional heavy paints and hard-baked coatings utterly failed. The aggressive saltwater penetrated the smallest scratch, and the craft would structurally rot from the inside out within weeks. The War Department realized they needed a compound that would actively displace saltwater, seal out oxygen, and never cure into a brittle shell. Military scientists developed an incredibly cheap liquid organic compound sprayed for pennies per gallon. It was a molecularly dense, dynamically self-healing fluid that crept into every microscopic weld seam. The untreated steel simply stopped rusting. Yet, if you look at any standard automotive manual printed from the 1970s onward, this highly effective protocol was systematically erased. They did not hide it because it failed. They hid it because it worked too well. This is the part where the numbers become uncomfortable. Everyday consumers spend tens of billions of dollars annually trying fruitlessly to combat winter automotive decay. The service industry profoundly knows that if a $2 military-grade alternative became public knowledge, their highly profitable financial structure would collapse overnight. They buried the science, we dig it up. Furthermore, a deeply critical report published by the Environmental Protection Agency in 1998 detailed that commercial petroleum-based undercoating sprays are highly toxic and frequently wash off directly into the local groundwater supply. The massive automotive industry championed these fundamentally inferior chemicals simply because they guarantee repeat customers. If you made it this far, you already logically know more about this topic than 99% of normal consumers. Subscribe to this channel and share this analysis to protect this critical knowledge before the massive aftermarket industry tries to successfully erase it again. The fundamental question is why a multinational chemical giant has not simply bottled this 1940s formula and sold it to the masses. The absolute answer forms the bedrock of modern corporate greed. You cannot patent raw, unrefined natural lipids and organic esters. And what you cannot patent, you cannot build a billion-dollar industry on. Because no single corporation can legally claim exclusive ownership, there is zero monopoly to exploit. Therefore, it is entirely ignored by the retail market. When you mistakenly apply a hard, rubberized undercoating, you fundamentally misunderstand how a chassis behaves. A rigid coating inevitably suffers microscopic fractures, creating an active galvanic cell directly against the raw steel beneath the seemingly intact rubber. The military engineers understood that to permanently defeat rust, the chemical barrier must be a completely non-Newtonian fluid that literally never dries, constantly creeping infinitesimally across the surface to silently seal any new scratches caused by flying road debris. We are finally approaching the exact chemical makeup of the $2 liquid that permanently kills undercarriage rust forever. But here is the missing step the industry actively conceals. Most ordinary people falsely assume that smearing heavy axle grease or acidic used motor oil underneath their car will chemically protect the metal. That is a massive, fatal error. Used motor oil actively breaks down critical rubber suspension bushings, while heavy grease merely attracts abrasive dirt and traps moisture against the raw frame. Here is the absolutely only specific protocol that guarantees permanent protection. The highly classified military-grade liquid is a specific, thermally heated emulsion of raw, unrefined lanolin wax and pure boiled linseed oil. Lanolin is an incredibly dense, hydrophobic natural wax continually secreted by sheep to protect their wool from freezing rain. Scientifically considered one of the most powerful natural water repellents on Earth. Pure boiled linseed oil is a deeply penetrating organic polymer that naturally creeps directly into the microscopic, invisible pores of solid iron. When accurately combined, these two incredibly cheap substances dynamically create an impenetrable, self-healing barrier that paralyzes chemical oxidation at a subatomic level. To perfectly create this permanent solution, you must cheaply acquire solid, raw lanolin in heavy bulk for pennies per ounce at any agricultural supply store, alongside a standard bottle of pure boiled linseed oil. The precise mixing ratio is absolutely critical. You must perfectly mix precisely 4 parts of the boiled linseed oil to exactly 1 part of the solid, raw lanolin wax. Place the solid lanolin into a metal container and safely heat it until it fully transitions into a clear, flowing, golden liquid. Do not ever let it boil. Slowly stir in the boiled linseed oil, forcing the complex molecular structures to permanently bind into a heavy, protective emulsion. While the golden liquid is still remarkably warm, carefully transfer it directly into an inexpensive pneumatic spray gun or hand pump garden sprayer. Your vehicle undercarriage must be completely dry. You absolutely do not need to mechanically grind away existing surface rust. As long as there is no active flaking, the warm emulsion will naturally penetrate straight through the existing porous iron oxide layer, aggressively choking off its atmospheric oxygen supply and rapidly turning the rust into a hardened, protective base layer. Spray the warm liquid thoroughly over the heavy frame rails, floorboards, and directly inside all hidden factory drainage holes. As it hits the freezing cold steel, the lanolin partially solidifies, dramatically thickening the linseed oil into an actively creeping protective gel. Within precisely 24 hours, this complex chemical gel will drastically migrate. It seemingly defies gravity, naturally crawling upward by up to 2 inches to perfectly coat the dark inside of hidden metallic cavities, where heavy salt and corrosive moisture typically collect and fester. Because this organic mixture never fully dries, any aggressive rock strike that severely scratches the surface will heal itself entirely within mere minutes as the heavy gel dynamically flows right back over the newly exposed raw metal. It completely ignores all modern road salt, permanently repels atmospheric moisture, and safely conditions existing rubber bushings. A single application performed in late autumn will shield your vehicle entirely through the absolute most brutal winter conditions imaginable. Come the following spring, the entire underside of your car will be perfectly coated in a light protective layer of standard road dust that has chemically adhered directly to the surface of the gel, seamlessly forming an incredibly tough, naturally armored skin. You have now successfully bypassed the $30 billion aftermarket corporate trap, utilized a forgotten military protocol to make your vehicle physically immortal against atmospheric decay, and permanently protected your immensely valuable property for remarkably less than the price of a morning coffee.